Lords, I'm very supportive of Amendment 64A, but also I think the Amendments 65, 66, 66A and 94 are also ways of both reassuring and protecting homeschoolers in relation to the bill. The noble Lord Soley made the point that over his many years in politics that many have threatened to go to prison for their beliefs and rarely do, and we all recognise that point. But it's also true that over the many years that I've been involved in politics, I've been reassured that many a law is supportive and not a punishment or a threat, and I've learned to not take much notice of that either. And this notion that if you were a good actor you have nothing to fear actually is quite chilling, because then you have to say who's going to decide who the good actors are, who's going to define what the good parent is in this instance. I also think it's a little unfair that people that feel so strongly that they say that they would go to prison are kind of dismissed, because I think it does speak to the fact that this bill has created uncertainty, and the Minister has gone out of her way to be reassuring, and I don't want to dismiss that. I think that's something to be taken seriously, but I think all that these amendments are trying to do is to codify that reassurance in a variety of ways, rather than just having it on word of mouth. I also think it's not helpful to say whether it's a minority of homeschoolers who are worried about the register or a majority. I mean, in a way, who cares whether it's a majority or a minority? It's a principle, and I think that the noble Lord Lucas has made that very clear, and I want to emphasise that there is a principle of freedom here that we should not just throw out or dismiss as some sort of inconvenience to more pragmatic concerns. I think the problem with the register is it isn't just a register. It ends up being that the register looks as though it requires far more in terms of, as the Right Reverend Prelate has just explained, in terms of details of means. More information than you just need in a register. It doesn't just tick a box or a register. And I think that that's why many home educators are very anxious about it. But more broadly, I mean, I'm not a home educator, I've never been home educated, to be frank with you. I'm not interested in home educators per se. But I am interested in a situation where the state collects so much data, a database of children, so much information, and interferes in a freedom that we have in a democratic society to home educate if that's what we want. I also think that the cloud of suspicion that the Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Carlisle, explained that's been created, that this is an assault on, potentially on deeply held religious and philosophical freedoms, is something we should all take seriously as Democrats who support a free society. I think that the suspicion that some home educators have of the state and the way that education is conducted is actually what we should be discussing in relation to this schools bill, if it were not such a basket case of a bill that we can't get anywhere in discussing what we ought to be discussing, which is irritating. Because I think that we have got a problem when many parents believe that the state can't be trusted to educate their children. There's all sorts of controversial issues that are coming up, but I don't think it's a criticism of home educators that they don't trust the state, or that they think the state does not provide the kind of education that their SEND child needs, or that their bully child needs, or they don't want somebody to be exposed to the kind of materials in sex and relationship education that we'll probably be discussing later and that have been all over the news. These are reasonable things to hold. These are reasonable philosophical ideas that you might have, and religious freedom, or all of those ideas, are things which we should be protecting in this House. Because we should remember, because I've just finished reading over the weekend the Telford report, and we should remember that it's not a question of, we have to be careful when the state starts saying the people who are acting suspiciously are the parents, when I've just read the Telford report, having read the Oldham report, in which state actors, councils, schools, the police, all sorts of people ignored in plain sight the sexual grooming and abuse of thousands of young people. You know, I'm not prepared to just say, I trust the state. I think it's perfectly reasonable when people don't, But we have to at least reassure people that their freedoms to withdraw from state schooling, because after all, it's not the law that you have to school your child, it's simply the law that you have to educate your child. And I trust those parents to educate them as much as I trust the state, which is that where there's bad actors, you act, but you don't treat everyone as though they're potentially bad actors all the time.